And I thought I'd finally make a video about my cruiser bicycle collection. As you can see, I've got no self-restraint or control when it comes to purchasing these bikes. The shed's too small to keep them in. I've got too many now. Half of them are for sale, but they're too good not to share with the rest of the world. So let's start with the Mark 1 Ratfink. I bought this bike on eBay. The only modification it had done to it was the Robson's 4-inch wheel on the back. It's 24 by 4-inch, but it's still running a Schwalbe Crazy Bob 24 by 2.35 tyre on it, which has been stretched to fit. It's got the Electro 24 by 3-inch inner tube in there, and it works really well. The fitment's really tight, so it's always good fun when it comes to taking the wheel off for maintenance. When you put it back on, it takes a while to get it right, but you get there in the end. It's got a KMC Z1 gold chain, Brooks B33 saddle on it, lovely paint job. Got these nice little stoppers here which stop the frame getting bashed when the forks come round. Normally these forks have got like these rubber protectors on them, but I'm not really that keen on them, to be honest, so off they came and the bump stops got put on. It's got these big ape hanger bars on there with a tandem gear cable. Originally when I put these bars on, I didn't bother fitting this cable, and the old gear cable got ripped out of the shifter, which made me have to get a new cable for it. It's got an original Ratfink bell, horn, and that is the Mark 1 Ratfink. It's a very heavy bike with a steel frame, coaster brake on the back with the 3-speed shifter. I always fancy putting a stick shift on it, but what's the point? There isn't really anywhere to mount it on these frames. I think it would look a bit out of place. It's got the forks without the brake tabs on, which is nice. So it gives it that nice clean look. And that is the Mark 1 Electro Rat Rods, which they only made in 2003 and 2004. I think either 2005 or 06 onwards, correct me if I'm wrong, they changed the design and then brought out the Mark 2 Ratfink, which we have here. Main difference being it's got the aluminium frame with the sort of boxier fuel tank. They're a lot lighter, these aluminium frames, but I'm not that keen on the sort of reverse dropout design on them, even though they are quite attractive to look at. I prefer the BMX style dropout on the Mark 1. This bike was an interesting find. Both the Pinkfink and the Mark 2 Ratfink were in pieces when I first got them off Facebook Marketplace. It's a massive cruiser bicycle bundle. I ended up having to pretty much build them up from scratch. They both didn't have these handlebars on them, that was missing, so ended up getting some black kink stream rides to match the black forks, which the previous owner had painted black. The frame was completely raw, and this isn't the original paint on this bike. It's Mazda Spirit Green. The previous owner has tried to smooth the welds out, as well as adding all of this extra plating and stuff, because he was going for the clean look. I quite like it when you can see the welds on the frame. They can sort of give you an indicator of the quality of the build, but each to their own. It was also missing the genuine pedals, so I've had to make do with these ones for now. Other than that, everything on it is original. It has the Ratfink bell on it again. Got the genuine badge. It even came with the badge ready to be put back on the bike after giving it its paint job. The orange wheels on it. They changed the design on these so that the front tyre was the same width as the rear, which I'm definitely not a fan of. The Pinkfink is pretty much the same story. The only real difference being, and I thought the frames were exactly the same, but the head tube on the Pinkfink, if you look at the badge now and then compare it to the badge on the Ratfink, it's actually got a much shorter head tube on it, and I never thought there was any difference in these frames, but it turns out there is. Same story with the Pinkfink. It's got the black bars, original Electro bell, the black forks, which were a nightmare to fit. Previous owner had painted them black and got rid of the brake tabs on both, which then made it extremely difficult to fit the forks in the yokes There was lots of screwdriver in the gap and jimmying them in very gently in order to get them to fit without scratching. Unlike when I fitted the brakeless chrome forks on my Mark 1 rat fink, they just slid in without an issue because they are the right diameter for the yokes they were designed for. Both the pink fink and the Mark 2 rat fink are for sale. I'm trying to sell them on, even though I'd quite like to keep them if I had the space, but unfortunately needs must. Onto the Electro Rat Rods. This one is my rat rod to keep. Found it on eBay in showroom condition, even came with the manual from 2006. Aluminium frame, very durable and goes very long distances. I've done about 30+ mile rides on it. It's a wonderful bike. The only things I've changed on it are the tyres, got a Wonder King on the front and a Classic Cycles Street Hog on the back, as I wore out the Fatio that it came with because I did so many miles on it. It's got a Brooks B33 honey saddle on it, similar to the Mark 1 rat fink, although that's in black, with a Cell Italia saddle bag on the back and Cell Italia grips, which are so supple and lovely. They came with these cork bar ends, not the ones that are fitted right now. It came with official, Cell Italia bar ends. I'm just trying to get the camera to focus. There we go. So the diameter of the bars is too wide for the Cell Italia bar ends, so I ended up whittling my own Prosecco ones. Very easy job. Only took me 2 bottles of Prosecco and a knife to do, so yeah, highly recommended. But maybe do the whittling the next day if possible. The only issue I have fitting these grips is that it's a lot longer than the shift grip. Normally the shifter sits a bit closer to here, and as a result it sits slightly askew on the bar, which makes the shifting not quite as smooth as it should be, but it's a minor complaint. Removed the brake from the front for that clean look. Easily refittable. It still looked quite clean with the U-brake on the front, to be honest. Got the KMC gold chain like the Mark 1 rat fink's got. It's got a coffee koozie and a ding dong bell, so people hear you coming while you're sitting off that white. From Hitchin Coffee Lab, of course. Onto the other rat rod that I've got. This was a restoration bike that I originally bought from a bicycle charity shop down south. I can't remember exactly where it was. The grips and seat on this bike are the same ones that originally came with this bike before I replaced them. The grips and seat that were on this bike originally were absolutely destroyed, and I did end up selling them on to someone who planned to restore them, so it was completely rusty and unrideable when I first bought this bike. I only paid about 50 quid for it. As you can see now, it's looking beautiful. It's had quite a lot of restoration work done to the perishable parts, like the mudguard was all rusty. The chain guard was also rusty. It's missing the front mudguard because there was only half of that there, and you can't really restore something where there's only half of it unless you can find another half. Kickstand was seized, so chopped that off and put a chainstay mounted kickstand on, which works. It didn't come with the original crankset, which is interesting. It's got this weird 2-piece Sturmey Archer one, which does work. You can see where I've masked up the flames and Electra badge from where it had to be painted and restored. It's come out quite well, this bike, and looking forward to selling it to someone who will love it and cherish it, because they really are quite durable, these rat rod bikes. I do love how the front end is a standard push bike, but then the back end of it is sort of something from a dragster with this big wide rear wheel, and I love how it keeps the format of 24-inch rear and 26-inch front, same as the old school Mark 1 rat fink did. It's a lovely look. Last but not least, it's the electric chopper bike, which I bought off eBay about a year ago. Originally planned to sell this bike on, but it's ended up becoming a money pit and a labour of love. The amount of blood, sweat and tears that have been poured into this bike is probably immeasurable by now. I say to myself that I will add up the cost of how many modifications have been done to this bike since purchasing it. And I reckon they might be close to or over the price of what I actually paid for the bike in the first place, which is a sobering thought. Now, when I speak to my local bike shop about this, they just say, don't think about it. When I first bought this bike, it had crappy cable brakes on it, which have now been replaced by some of the most immense hydraulic disc brakes that you can buy. Although they are about 10 years old, hope don't make the 6-piston models anymore, but bought them more for the pub points to be able to say it's got 6-piston calipers on the bike, and they do look really cool with the red 203mm saw rotors on there. A lot of work had to be put in to get these brakes to fit, not least the custom brake tabs, which were welded on there by Stevenage Sheet Metal. They did a wonderful job of that. If we come to the front, they also did the same thing with the front forks. Now funnily, when it first came to fitting this this disc brake, it wouldn't fit at all because the brake it had on before was much smaller, and the cut on this fork here was only down to about here, so I had to first off take the forks off and make the cut bigger. Then I had to get that welded up. Then I foolishly got the fork re-chromed before realising that once the calipers were fitted, or rather wouldn't fit because the tabs that came on the bike were wrong, I then had to take the fork back to the welders to get another custom tab put on the bottom, which I haven't bothered to get re-chromed. I thought it looked quite cool just lacquering over that. I've always thought, why didn't they bother just putting the tab on the side like you get on some mountain bikes? You could have had the caliper sitting here and a lot less going on, but I quite like the upside down look, and the brakes are brilliant. They stop on a dime. With most push bikes, if you press the front brake too hard, you go over the handlebars. On this bike, the front wheel just skids along, which is great. It doesn't take much press of these levers in order for it to do that, so you have to be quite careful, especially in the wet. Really, a lot of the brake comes from the back because the tyre's so much wider. It has less tendency to skid, but you really have to use both brakes at the same time to ensure a reliable stopping distance is obtained. It's painted in Mazda Soul Red Crystal 46V, which is, I've heard, an absolute nightmare to paint according to my local paint shops. I haven't been able to find this paint in can form where it comes out the same way as it does when it's been painted professionally. I can't remember how many stages and steps there are to paint this paint. It does look great, but it chips like anything, and getting it resprayed, don't even ask. Got a nice Hope headset on the front end here, as the one it came with was the same rubbish that you would get on the Schwinn Stingray. It's got the gold KMC Z1 chain, the same as what the Mark 1 Ratfink and this Rat Rod has. Looks really nice. When I first bought the bike, it had a mishmash chain of several different sorts, which wasn't ideal. That soon came off. Onto the bottom bracket. Got a custom made, or rather custom anodised profile Blackjack 44 tooth sprocket. Normally these bits are chrome as well as the teeth, but the guy I bought it from in the States had it custom anodised. It really is a one-off, and also quite a sought after and rare sprocket anyway, so I had this sprocket hanging on the wall for quite a long time before I decided to finally put it on this bike. But getting it to fit was another story, which I'm about to go into. Got the profile 175mm racing cranks to match the sprocket with some DMR V12 pedals on the end. Although I did consider a set of DK iron crosses, I think they would have looked quite cool. The bottom bracket itself was another nightmare to get to work because most bikes use a 68mm shell bottom bracket or 73mm or thereabouts. This one has a 120mm wide bottom bracket shell, which is off the OCC Schwinn Stingray. It did have the bottom bracket and cranks and pedals and all of that off the Schwinn Stingray, which are very cheap and not very nice to look at. I wanted to change the square taper crank to a sort of 48 spline BMX setup, so started off by getting a 165mm gusset pygmy axle which I had to get the middle of machined down to 19mm. So each end with the 48 splines on the axle was 19mm in diameter, but the middle section was 20mm for some reason. Apparently this is to be compatible with a bottom bracket that Gusset made many years ago, but I ended up getting a Gusset IASC bottom bracket which was made for a 68mm shell. Had to get the axle machined down in the middle from 20mm to 19mm in order to get it to fit. The cranks just about go on the end of the splines. As you can see, there isn't actually quite enough poking out either end in order to fully position the cranks on the end of the axle, but there is enough there in order to get it to work. I had to get custom sleeves made up for this bottom bracket here to stop the bearings from being crushed. There's one on the inside and one on the outside. Probably took this bottom bracket off about 4 or 5 times before getting it to work fully, as it was just seizing up before, but it was all to do with this adjustable collar here. I'm very used to BMX sort of press fit mid bottom brackets. Those are the type that you can just press and they work, and wasn't used to this adjustable one here, but managed to get it working in the end, which is quite a feat. I don't know if I spent more time tinkering with or crying over this bike than riding it, but it's an absolute labour of love, and I was going to sell it on, but like I said, it's just a money pit now, and yeah, probably not going to get rid of it, to be honest. It's too much fun. If you're thinking about getting into these bikes, I highly recommend it. They're not as intimidating as they look. They can be a bit of a chore uphill, but if you're willing to put in the legwork, they're actually a lot of fun and very capable, and can go a lot further than you'd think. So if you're looking for something a bit different, wanted to break the mould, I'd highly recommend a Electro bicycle, or maybe something even more extreme and custom such as this. Happy riding!